All right, folks, we talk a lot of time about income inequality on this show. And it really is one of the biggest issues that we're facing in this country. All this talk right now, you hear about inflation, about the rising grocery prices and gas prices and on and on and on. But this really impacts the working poor in America. And then you have the people who act as if these folks are just out here just blowing off and not even focused on their jobs. You hear people say, oh, folks are lazy and what are they doing and why aren't they working harder? When the reality is we saw during COVID the frontline workers. We saw what it means when they're the ones who are working transportation jobs, the ones who are in grocery stores, the ones who are working in restaurants. It's amazing how COVID caused a lot of people to finally pay attention to the individuals who are in these particular jobs. We cannot overlook this very issue. We cannot overlook what it means, the job that they're doing and how they're not being properly paid for these jobs. And so you have had this fight for a very long time to properly fund the working poor. Many of the jobs that we have in this country, a lot of them are African American. Yes, nearly half of black workers in America make less than $15 an hour. A new report by Oxfam America found that 47% of black workers and 70% of women of color earn less than $15 an hour. 26% of white workers and 32% of all American workers earn less than $15 an hour. To explain more about the Oxfam American study, Dr. Kaitlyn Henderson, Senior Research Advisor for Oxfam, joins us from D.C. Kaitlyn, glad to have you on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So put this in perspective for us. Where are most, when we talk about black workers and we talk about the 70% women of color, what states, what regions of the country are they largely in?
Well, as might not be so surprising, overwhelmingly, black workers who are making less than $15 an hour are concentrated in the South, which is to say there is a higher proportion of black workers in the South making less than $15 an hour than any other part of the country. This has everything to do with occupational segregation. This has everything to do with where people are living in this country, quite literally. So as you see on the map, the darker the color, the higher the proportion of workers who are making less than 15. And overwhelmingly, we see those darker colors really showing up in the South.
And what's interesting about that, when the federal government was providing relief, unemployment relief, in all these southern states, people like Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, oh, these people got to get back to work, where people were actually making more unemployment than they were in their actual jobs. But Graham said nothing about that. They were complaining that people, they're lazy, you need to get back to work, but they were making more unemployment. And I kept telling people, that's a problem that you're making more money on unemployment than you are in your actual job.
100%. And one of the other reasons that we see such a high proportion in the South is because these are states that have not lifted their own minimum wage above the federal minimum. So the federal minimum wage is $7.25. It has not moved in 13 years. And during that time, it has lost 21% of its value. And that is, for the most part in the South, the minimum wage, which is to say nothing of tipped wage workers, such as restaurant workers that make even less. And as we know, tipped wage workers, service industry workers, are also disproportionately people of color and especially women of color. So when we have certain senators, especially representing states in the South, talking about how people need to get back to work, the truth is people need to be paid more.
And one of the things that they kept saying is like, oh, no, we can't pay them more. Businesses are going to shut down. They're going to go out of business. This is going to be just so unfair on the companies. But when you start breaking down these numbers and when you see 70% of women of color earning less than $15 an hour, and then folks wonder, then the same people yell and complain about, you always want handouts and government assistance, when the reality is, if you actually run the numbers, most of these southern states, almost a majority of their funding, or half of it, comes from the federal government.
Yeah, what's crazy is there's a lot to say about that. So what we know, there's a lot of data that a higher minimum wage actually helps small businesses. So the idea that raising the wage is going to hurt these businesses is not true. In fact, the minimum wage was literally created during the New Deal under President Roosevelt in order to give people buying power to help restart the economy. So this is in 1938. So the entire reason we even have a minimum wage is in order to help small businesses. So of course, a higher wage is in fact helping small businesses. But yeah, like what you're talking about, 50% of women of color in this country make less than 15 an hour. And again, this has everything to do with occupational segregation. This has to do with the legacy of minimum wages that when they were invented, excluded Black workers because very specific workers were excluded from minimum wages, such as domestic workers, agricultural workers, and restaurant workers, who in the 1930s, of course, were Black workers, especially in the South. So there's a long legacy here. This has everything to do with the legacy of racism and sexism in this country, and we're seeing the echoes of that even today.
Well, and on that particular point, it was laughable because the very states that cut that unemployment insurance, when they were looking at the economic recovery, the places where they were losing money, it was slower than other places, were those same southern states. Well, if you cut the money, folks had less money to spend.
Absolutely. And, if you think about it, those are also the states that don't have a higher tip minimum wage. Those are the states that have not expanded Medicaid. Those are the states that don't have paid leave. So if you get sick, you lose your job. There are so many reasons why we need the federal government to really step up and raise the bar, because in certain states, there is not the political will to do so themselves. So this is an opportunity for the federal government, not only to raise the minimum wage, but to sort of expand the social safety net even broader. COVID showed us how important that is. And as you said at the beginning of this segment, a lot of the workers that were the most impacted by these wage policies that are making less than $15 an hour were considered essential continue to be essential due to the pandemic, and were very recently celebrated as our heroes, these same workers. And yet somehow we have chosen in this country that we don't want to pay our heroes. So we really need to reassess what we value.
Questions from our panel. Tanya, you're first.
Yeah, so the numbers in your study, and I really appreciate you all bringing this research to light, show that there's a certain percentage of women of color who are paid less than minimum wage. What percentage of Black women workers are paid less than minimum wage? And what are the implications for children when women are not paid equitably?
Yeah, so the implications are huge. Let me start with the implications for women, and then we can break it down a little bit further. So when women are not paid an appropriate wage, and frankly, we are focused on $15, who makes less than $15 an hour in this study, because there is a fight for 15. As we know, the current legislation in front of Congress is looking at a $15 minimum wage. So we wanted to see who are the people that were going to be impacted by this. So that's why we chose 15. $15 an hour is not a living wage in a lot of places. It is sort of the bar that we would like to see set. But when women are not paid an appropriate amount, then of course it's impacting children. In fact, there's some 57% of single parents are making less than $15 an hour, which essentially means that these are individuals who are having given inflation, are having a hard time keeping a roof over their heads, food on their table, and certainly cannot be affording childcare, which is one of the most expensive and underfunded things in this country. And so essentially what we're saying is that we don't value the individuals who they can't afford childcare, and yet they need to go to work. So of course, there are children who are falling through the cracks, and that's why there's been so much need on schools to provide everything for everyone, and also why so many people are relying on extended family members for childcare, because they don't make enough to even afford childcare. So we are doing a disservice to our children by not paying all workers more, but especially working parents and working mothers.
Jason.
Yes, Dr. Henderson, thank you for your really important work. I'm wondering what you say to people who say, I have several questions, but I'll try to make it simple here. What do you say to people that say that by raising the minimum wage, that we are going to hasten automation and that a lot of these jobs are going to disappear? And the second part of that question is also, what do you say to the right-wing pundits who say that $15 is not a good baseline because the cost of living in South Carolina or in Alabama is not quite there, that you could actually have a lower minimum wage than 15. What do you say to those people? And you'll be giving me some talking points, so I'm excited to hear your response.
Well, first of all, before she answers that question, I would say to those same damn people, how much are they making? I would also ask those very same people, how have you actually run the numbers? What you ought to do is get a calculator, Jason, and say, okay, let's say now, Doc, you said, Kaitlyn, you said the minimum wage, a lot of these states, how much is it? Seven what?
$7.25.
So, Jason, what you do is get a big ass calculator and go, 30 hours a week times $7.25 comes out to $217.50 times 4, mean 270 times 4 comes out to be $870. So please, y'all, tell me, how can a worker, somebody who spends 120 hours a month working and makes $870, please tell me, how do you pay for rent? How do you pay for food? How do you pay for diapers? How do you pay for daycare? How do you pay for transportation with $870? Force them to do the math, Jason. Kaitlyn, I'm sorry, Go ahead.
No, not at all. That's exactly right. And I think the question of automation is a good one. So the industries that are the fastest growing industries in this country are in the care sector. So elder care, care for people with disabilities, child care, and those are all things that cannot be automated.
Yep.
And those are all professions that are notably underpaid, and in fact, on average, make less than $15 an hour, especially childcare workers. So the question about automation doesn't really apply to some of the fastest growing sectors in this country. They cannot be automated. And so there's one answer for sure, and those are low wage workers. And then the other question that you had, of course, now I'm sort of spacing on what the other question was. Can you remind me what the second question was besides automation?
It was that the cost of living may be
that some places, and in fact, I've heard some black civil rights people say that, Jason, that that instead of 15, in some places like Mississippi, it could be 11 or 12. It doesn't have to be 15.
Okay,
Right.
so thank you. That's a great other question. So the truth is that right now, so $15 an hour is the equivalent of $31,200 a year. But we are at a moment in this country where inflation is at a 4-decade high. And so $31,200 a year for a full-time worker at $15 an hour is still not enough to afford housing and food and gas right now, and still get to work. So number one, cost of living has gone up everywhere because of inflation. And so in fact, $15 an hour is a baseline. And if you want a few more resources, our wonderful partners at the Economic Policy Institute just released a family cost calculator, and you can literally see what it costs for a family, either an individual or a family, someone with children, how much it costs them to live based on the county. And I believe that there is not a single county in this country where you can live on $15 an hour, except for maybe one. And if I recall, it wasn't even the South. So the truth is that you need $15 an hour at minimum to, in fact, live. It doesn't matter where you live. And I want to return to one of the other questions that was asked by the panel that I realized I did not answer. We don't have data that's specific to Black women. We have data specific to women of color. So we wanted to look at the cross section, not just of one race, but women of color more broadly. So I don't have the numbers exactly for Black women. We have the numbers for Black workers, and then women of color, which includes Black women, Hispanic Latino women, Asian American women, Native American women as well. And so it's a little bit of a broader cross section, but really the point is that we are facing a continuation of not only a gender wage gap, but a racialized gender wage gap. And it really brings that intersectionality to mind that Kimberly Crenshaw helpfully gave us, which is absolutely crucial. We're talking about policy realities, and we need to do more for women of color in this country.
Well, again, it's amazing when you listen to all of the excuses that people offer who don't understand. Last thing here, Kaitlyn, do this for the people who do not understand. Explain to them this whole issue with the restaurants and the tipping. That actually is one of the legacies of the late Herman Cain.
Well, so Restaurant workers were originally completely excluded from the minimum wage. They were not included in any type of minimum wage until the 1960s. And even then, there was a sub-minimum wage, which is referred to as the tipped wage. And that's what most people in the restaurant industry make, which is to say the servers, anyone who receives a tip for their work, they are only given a sub-minimum wage. The federal standard right now is $2.13 an hour. It has not moved since 1991, which is a shocking poverty wage. The other thing that we know about restaurant workers, tipped workers in general, is that is an industry that is disproportionately occupied by women, especially women of color, and is disproportionately experiences things like sexual harassment and sexual assault in the workplace. It is a super problematic industry that is extremely underpaid. But one of the things to remember is this fight for $15 was actually started in 2012 by restaurant workers. A lot of restaurant workers are the ones who are part of this great resignation, demanding better wages, demanding better pay, better treatment. And COVID is one of the things that sort of pushed it over the edge. So one of the things we really want to do is honor and celebrate the workers who banded together and are demanding better treatment for themselves. And in a lot of cases, really successfully. I'm thinking of all of the Starbucks workers that have gotten unions coming together. Really want to celebrate the Amazon workers in New York as well. But the legacy of tipped wages and tipping in this country is extremely problematic. There's a wonderful op-ed by Michelle Alexander in the New York Times from over the summer about how tipping is in many ways a legacy of slavery, and again disproportionately impacts women of color in this country, and especially Black women. So it is something we need to stop doing. We need to completely get rid of tipped wages, which is also known as sub-minimum wages. We need to lift every single worker in this country to a single universal minimum wage, and then we need to lift that wage to starting at $15. It's the very least we can do.
All right, then. Well, look, tell people where they can actually see the study and read it for themselves.
Absolutely. The study can be found at oxfamamerica.org/low-wage-report 2022. And if you want to take a look at the map, which includes an interactive place where you can click on your state and see how the state is doing in terms of people making less than 15, it is www.oxfamamerica.org/low-wage-map 2022.
All right, then. Kaitlyn Henderson, Dr. Kaitlyn Henderson, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Black power.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?